Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. Let's do it. Let's get to it. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. It is Friday, December 16th. I'm your host, Jon June. And of course, this guy to my left would be Greg Penniman, aka G Money. Greg, how you feeling on this fantasy playoff Friday?
Doing well. You know, getting those last minute decisions in right now. Last minute additions. Thursday night happened, so maybe some people got off to a good start. Decent start or bad start. We'll see, but we're ready for Saturday first actually, and then Sunday.
And God bless you if you had Christian McCaffrey and or George Kittle playing in that Thursday night game. God bless you if you went against them, because you are feeling it right now. I mean, George Kittle goes pretty much the whole season doing basically mediocre at the tight end position, to the point where on Wednesday's show I said, and I quote, I think I would go Jeff Driscoll over George Kittle. And hindsight's 2020, but those sounds like the dumbest words that I think I have ever spoken on this podcast, especially after the 92-yard, 2-touchdown performance by George Kittle. I mean, obviously, we're talking about the San Francisco-Arizona Cardinals game. And, I mean, outside of Brock Purdy basically just looking like he belongs in the NFL, in his third NFL game of NFL action, George Kittle looked like he was very involved in the offense in terms of, being a weapon in the absence of Deebo Samuel and whatnot. But, Greg, what do you think of the performance by the 49ers and, Brock Purdy and, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, definitely a great performance from them. The defense played well as usual. McCaffrey getting those 8 targets in the passing game looks like he's going to benefit the most from the Deebo Samuel absence, which is great. Continue to just add to his RB1 resume pretty much. George Kittle got targeted 5 times. Glad 2 of them were touchdowns. It's definitely good to see that. If he can be a factor in the red zone and then just making big plays, for sure. So, and Brock Purdy is continuing to be a streaming value quarterback for this offense. The system, it works. It fits anyone that makes them succeed. And glad, on the other side, Kenneth Walker was able to give people an RB2 day coming back off injury, getting, those catches as well, in the passing game.
It was okay. It was 11 PPR points.
That's an RB2 day. That's an RB2
We'll see. We'll see.
Really good RB2 week.
It could be a good RB2 week. It could also end up being like a RB3 week. I mean, I did say I had him as an RB3. 11 points is like, and you felt fortunate to get that 11 points, right? Because it came down to those catches at the end of the game. But yeah, I mean, if you're getting double digits from any player, typically you'd feel decently good about it. So I'll give you that. But yeah, the Christian McCaffrey usage was great. It seemed just like Brock Purdy was just like, all right, no one's open. Okay, where's McCaffrey? And Brock Purdy, he plays with poise. He doesn't seem rattled. No moment or no situation is ever too big for him, it seems. I mean, again, small sample size here, but just even watching him, how he handled being backed up against his own goal line, right? Like a lot of young quarterbacks, a lot of young quarterbacks might not be conscious of that, of where they are on the field at that point and the decision making and, the risk versus the reward of certain things. And for him, on that 3rd and 13, being backed up and just saying, you know what, screw it. Like, I'm just going to, I'm either going to take off and run or, I'll get it to this check down. Hey, maybe we're not going to get a ton of yards out of it, but, we'll punt, we'll play field position because I got a great defense. So, Brock Purdy looks pretty much ready for this, and they've clinched their division, so they're going to go ahead into the playoffs there, play at least one home game there. So Brock Purdy, we'll see how he responds to playoff football, but I feel like he'll respond pretty well.
Yeah, for sure. He'll continue to not kill you and give you a safe floor, I think.
And then what about on the Seattle side? I mean, obviously with Kenneth Walker, he was fine. DK Metcalf was okay. I think 7 for 55. So again, not a terrible day. Uh, however, Tyler Lockett, walks out of this game with 60 something receiving yards, but also what looks like a broken finger. So he's expected to miss. Again, we're talking about Seattle. We're talking about Pete Carroll. So the prognosis says you players should be out for 3 weeks. Pete Carroll says he'll play this week. So we'll have to see
Facts.
exactly what's going on there. But fantasy managers that are looking to count on Tyler Lockett for the fantasy playoffs might have to make contingency plans here.
Yeah, definitely. I would bank on Tyler Lockett, being out for foreseeable time. I just, bank on worst case scenario so you can prep for next week if you guys make it to next week. DK, yeah, had a solid day. The offense as a whole was pretty down. No fan was able to get that touchdown at the end, so that was pretty big for people that streamed him. And yeah, we knew it was gonna be a tough matchup for Geno, so it wasn't a guy that we were jumping to play.
Yeah, somebody asked me. I still thought he could be a QB1. And because just that mainly says more about the quarterbacks and their matchups than it does about what I thought Geno could do in that game. Someone asked me on Twitter, Geno Smith or Deshaun Watson, and I said Geno Smith. I said it's tough, but I have Geno 2 spots higher. And I'm watching the game, and I was like, crap, I can't believe I recommended Geno Smith. And then by the end of it, he finishes with 15 and a half, fantasy points there, which is about exactly what I had him projected for. So I felt pretty good about that. So for that person's sake, I'm just hoping Deshaun scores less. But yeah, Greg, let's talk about some of these games. We obviously broke down Thursday night football. We obviously have some Saturday games that we already discussed. So if you haven't listened to that or you haven't caught those breakdowns, just make sure you go back and listen because we have a 1 o'clock game, a 4:30 game, and then an 8:15, 8:30 primetime game. So if you haven't listened to that, just make sure you go back and listen. And while you're there, just make sure you comment, like, subscribe, whether you're watching on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, or listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Play. Just make sure you show the show some love. So without further ado, Greg, let's jump into these matchups. And the first matchup that we are going to discuss here today is the 5-8 Atlanta Falcons traveling to New Orleans. They take on the 4-9 New Orleans Saints. Both these teams are alive, they're alive for the division. Let's just say that. And so in terms of the weather, this game is played in a dome, but most of the games this week it will be cold. Some of them will have wind, but we'll discuss those as we go along. But in regards to this game, in terms of the injuries for Atlanta, Marcus Mariota, he was officially placed on injured reserve with that knee injury. For New Orleans, Juwan Johnson, Adam Troutman, they're both limited participants dealing with ankle injuries. Mark Ingram was placed on the injured reserve. Dwayne Washington is dealing with an illness. And so Eno Benjamin was claimed after being waived by the Houston Texans. So he's on his third team in about a month, going from Arizona to Houston to now New Orleans. So in terms of this game here, I will take the under on 42.5. I will take the New Orleans Saints, or the Atlanta Falcons rather, to cover the 4 points. But I will take the New Orleans Saints to ultimately win the game here. For Atlanta, Drake London is interesting as a wide receiver 3. Not sure I can trust any running back for Atlanta. You could tell yourself the narrative. Rookie quarterback. They're going to lean on the run game. So, but like Cordell Patterson hasn't been great. Tyler Algier, I think, is super efficient, but doesn't get, enough work and enough volume for you to feel confident about that you'll get more than 7 fantasy points. Desmond Ridder, I think if you play in Superflex 2 quarterback leagues, he's somebody that I would stash because his skill set is intriguing. He's athletic enough to run, but he actually is a decent enough passer, and he graded out as the second highest quarterback in my quarterback prospect model for rookies. So he is somewhat intriguing. But again, it's just a stash from that standpoint for me. And then on the New Orleans side, Alvin Kamara and RB1. The matchup is good. New Orleans, or Atlanta rather, allows the 10th most PPR points to running backs over the last 3 games. Atlanta is the worst matchup for wide receivers over the last 3 games. So Olave, he does have that big play in him for sure. But again, like the matchup is tough. So I'm going to have him down as a wide receiver 3. But I think that's really as far as I'm going to go in this game.
Yeah, I'm going to also take the under. I'm going to take Atlanta to cover, but I'm going to take the Saints to win. Definitely not a lot of pieces you want to go crazy on here, but on the Atlanta side, I agree with you. Drake London is probably the only option I'm looking at as a wide receiver 4. Cordell Patterson has been struggling over the last 4 weeks. He's more in that low end RB3 territory, more mid tier RB3. As if you just don't really have any depth and you're forced to start him at a flex. But it's been rough for him in the last since he's come back from that injury. On the Saints side, Alvin Kamara, agree with you, RB1 for sure. The receivers, Atlanta have been good over the entire year, but with AJ Terrell being back, I think that really helped them out a lot. So Chris Olave, I think is a lone wide receiver 2, and that's about it. It's I guess Taysom Hill has the Jeff Driscoll kind of aspect there, but you're pretty much banking on him getting a touchdown if you're playing him.
Yeah, I mean, we did see how his usage go up dramatically as a pass catcher.
Mm-hmm.
With the absence of both Johnson and Troutman. So
Yep.
I maybe they go back to that again. He did play significant snaps that week, so there's a possibility there that he could be valuable. Let's move on to the next game here, and so we've got this game is interesting, more interesting by the minute. The 6-7 Detroit Lions. I want to see if this line moved. It did move a little bit. Oh, yeah. The 6-7 Detroit Lions. This game, according to FanDuel Sportsbook, we had it down as a 44.5 point total. I guess it moved by a point to 43.5. But we'll prognosticate on the 44.5, Greg. In terms of I said the Detroit Lions are 1-point favorites, 44.5 point total. In terms of the weather, we're okay there. In terms of injuries, there's a bunch of guys questionable for the Detroit Lions. Nothing that's really concerning, though. For the New York Jets, Corey Davis, he is out with the concussion. Mike White is out with a rib injury. Quinnen Williams, he's been in DNP all week with a calf. He's questionable. I doubt he plays. Brandon Eccles, he is out. He's a sub corner there. And then there's a few other guys questionable for the Jets. But like I said, Mike White is out, which means Zach Wilson returns to the starting lineup after recently being elevated to QB2 earlier in the week. Greg, where are you with this game, and what are your thoughts here?
I'm gonna take the over still. I'm gonna take the Lions to cover, Lions to win. And this matchup here on Detroit, still a tough matchup on the outside for those receivers. Wouldn't go crazy on starting Jared Goff after a really good game last week. See him as like a high in QB2. DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, though, playable running backs. DeAndre Swift's been hot a lot over the last couple of weeks. He's I think they're both in RB2 territory. If they want to get a touchdown, they have some RB1 upside. Amon-Ra St. Brown is probably the only receiver I'm really looking as a lock. So as a borderline wide receiver 1. The ancillary guys, DJ Shark, Josh Reynolds, maybe you could find other options for them. And as far as the Jet side, definitely Zach Wilson being back affects this offense. You gotta expect. I'm not sure what we're gonna expect actually out of him, even though it's a really good matchup. He's had great matchups this year. So I wouldn't be that confident in switching from Mike White to Zach Wilson to go rush and play as a potential stream of the week category type player. So the running game, though, is very solid. I still think that's a good look for them, even though Detroit's run game is pretty solid. Donovan Knight, he's RB2, high in RB2 category. And as far as the receivers, they still, I think, have some solid matchups on the outside. Elijah Morris be upside flex, I think, in this one. And Garrett Wilson, borderline wide receiver 1 as well. But yeah, I wouldn't. Again, the bump down, I think to everyone, kind of this offense kind of changes a lot.
Yeah, I'm really genuinely curious to see how this goes, because we saw a completely different offense with Mike White in terms of not just how it functioned, but as a play caller, it was clear Mike LaFleur trusts Mike White a lot more than he does Zach Wilson in terms of the volume of pass plays that they run and how frequently they throw the football. In terms of the game, though, and how it plays out, Mike White being out changes nothing for me. I would have picked it the same way with Zach. If Mike White was playing, I'm taking the under. I'm taking Detroit to cover. I'm taking Detroit to win. I mean, Detroit is playing like the Jets were playing in October, right? Like they're going up against teams that are on paper better than them, have a better record, and they're beating them handedly, pretty decisively, and they're not taking any BS from any other team, right? Like they're not the same Lions that they've been in the past. Like they will punch you in the mouth, and they've resolved all the way back to I think they started 1-6, Greg? I forget what the record
Yeah, I think
was.
1-5 or 1-6. Yeah.
And now they're 6-7 with a shot to. They're mathematically alive to win their division and make the playoffs here. So when it's all said and done, I see both teams having the same record here, 7-7. For Detroit, Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's still a wide receiver 1 for me. Like I mentioned earlier in the week, he'll primarily play in the slot. He plays about 60% of his snaps from the slot. DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner do not travel there. They've traveled there occasionally, but they don't follow number 1 receivers into the slot. Stephon Diggs played in the slot a lot, and they didn't send those guys in there. And now while the Jets are still effective, I think Amon-Ra is still very good and a focal point of this offense that he'll still be, his floor will still be there. I agree with you. Goff is a low-end QB2. This matchup is tough. The Jets allow the 24th most fantasy points to the quarterback position over their last 3 games. I agree with the running back assessment. Swift is the running back that I would play. Have him as an RB3. Jamal Williams, I think, is a touchdown-dependent RB3. Maybe the Jets' run game gives in a little bit more with if Quentin Williams is forced to sit this game, which I think he will. But we'll see how that plays out. On the Jets side, Zach Wilson, he's a risky, high upside option as a quarterback too. Obviously, we know the matchup here is great. Detroit allows the second most fantasy points to the quarterback position. Zach Wilson hasn't been very good, but one thing Zach Wilson does bring to the table that Mike White didn't bring was mobility, which I think we see him use some of that a little bit more because he was starting to do that in the previous games. But again, the floor could bottom out. We could get the Zach Wilson that played against New England and just doesn't show up. Or, we could get the Zach Wilson that played against the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Miami Dolphins or, even the Buffalo Bills. So, yeah, curious to see how it turns out. But Garrett Wilson, I have him down as a wide receiver 2. Bam Knight, I think he's a volume-based RB2. Detroit has tightened up versus running backs. They actually allow the 32nd most PPR points to running backs over their last 3 games. So they are the worst matchup for running backs over the last 3 weeks. And so, especially with Zach Wilson starting, I really feel like Detroit's going to, conjure up a game plan where it's like, all right, Zach Wilson has to beat us. So that could be a tough sled in there for the run game. Elijah Moore, you mentioned him, definitely an intriguing option. The range of outcomes, they're wide, right? It could be, a 1-2 target day, but Detroit allows they give it up to slot receivers, and that's where Elijah Moore plays a lot of his snaps. And if the Jets are forced to go to a pass heavy approach, Elijah Moore will be on the football field. So I think opportunities should be there. He's definitely in play as a wide receiver 3 flex option.
Mm-hmm.
If Mike White played in this game, I think I would have started Elijah Moore confidently in the League of Extraordinary People over Jalen Waddle. Because Jalen Waddle plays in the snow game tomorrow against Buffalo. And it's just it's almost impossible to see any upside coming out of that game. But Yeah, it was just something I thought. Jalen Waddle is not like locked in wide receiver 2 that I think people will look to him as this week. But let's move on to this next matchup. The 10-3 Kansas City Chiefs traveling to Houston to take on the 1-11-1 Houston Texans. This game has a 48.5-point total, where the Houston Texans are 14-point home underdogs here. In terms of the weather, this game's okay. In terms of injuries for Houston, Brandon Cooks was limited on Thursday, limited on Friday, not expected to play. Damian Pierce, he's doubtful with an ankle. He's also not expected to play. Nico Collins, he's most likely expected to miss this game with a foot injury. And then for Kansas City, Kadarius Toney, he was a limited participant in practice with a hamstring. In terms of the game here, I'm going to take the under. I'm going to take Kansas City to cover. I'm going to take Kansas City to win. For Houston, Greg, you finally got me. I'm on board with Chris Moore this week. Might not have Cooks or Collins again. Both those guys most likely out. And the last time that happened in a game against Dallas last week, Moore had more than 40% of the targets. I believe it was 45% of the team targets. And Houston should be playing a decent amount from behind in this game. Not sure which running back I want to target for Houston. I mean, Rex Burkhead seemed to play most of the early down role, while Dare Ogunbowale played the passing down role, which I think is the role that they need in this game. But it's kind of also confusing because Rex Burkhead can also play that role. So not really sure which way I lean, but right now my gut is telling me to go with Ogunbowale. For Kansas City, I think it's the usuals, right? Mahomes and Kelsey, of course, they're ones at their respective positions. Pacheco here is going to be the RB2 for me. With RB1 upside, the matchup is great, and he should benefit from some positive game script. So I think if he's an RB2, then that would be McKinnon. Is closer to an RB3. Probably not going to have the upside that he had last week. And then Juju Smith-Schuster, he's a wide receiver 3 for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the under as well. I'm gonna take Houston to cover, but I'm gonna take Kansas City to win. Having Davis Mills back kind of helps Houston's passing game definitely a lot of bit. So on the Houston side, Chris Moore has a great matchup this week. He should be an upside flex as well. I think he's got some wide receiver 2 upside in this matchup, especially with if he's the only receiver that's healthy and ready to play. He should get heavy targeted. Both Dare Ogunbowale and Rex Burkhead, I think, are both in that RB4 territory. If you're really looking for some depth and some injuries, I think you could go one of them to give you a low floor, but no one I'm really jumping to start. And then on the Kansas City side, Mahomes mid-tier QB1. I think they should rely a lot on the run game. Isaiah Pacheco on the smash spot here. Jerick McKinnon, I think, is a low-end RB2 as well. And then Juju Smith-Schuster, low-end wide receiver 2, and Travis Kelce being the dominant tight end. He's the tight end 1 on the week every week.
Yeah, and definitely failed to mention, I did, and I noticed you did as well, Jeff Driscoll, if you play in Yahoo leagues, definitely a reasonable stream at the tight end position.
Yes, sir.
Zero viewer says, I feel like Orlando Brown is in such form. He's a real cornerstone to the team. Plus, the Chiefs have an Apache style to them, which gives them the edge. Yeah, that's fair analysis, I would say. Yeah. All right, let's move on to this next matchup here. The 12-1 Philadelphia Eagles traveling to Chicago to take on the 3-10 Chicago Bears. This game has a 48.5-point total. The Chicago Bears are 9-point home underdogs. Weather's okay in this game. It's supposed to be cold with some wind, but not enough to impact the passing game here. But definitely will make the on-field temperature seem a little bit chillier. For Chicago, Chase Claypool did not practice with a knee, and it was recently reported that he's actually expected to miss the next 4 weeks. I don't know if they officially placed him on the injured reserve or if that's just the timeline of his injury, but David Montgomery, rather, he was a DNP with an illness. And then for Philadelphia, Dallas Goedert is been designated to return from the injured reserve. And then they have a few other guys questionable. In this matchup, Greg, where do you lean?
I'm gonna take the under. I'm gonna take the Eagles to cover, and I'm gonna take the Eagles to win. On the Eagles side, I think Jalen Hurts, the QB1 on the week. You can rank him, especially in this matchup. The Bears, aren't great against the run. They're not very good against the pass. So, Jalen Hurts should you be able to use his legs and also have his receivers on the outside with some solid matchups. AJ Brown, wide receiver 1, Devontae Smith, high upside wide receiver 2. And if Dallas Goedert is able to play, you put him instantly back as a tight end 1 category, especially in this matchup. So those pieces are there. And then the best person in smash spot here is Miles Sanders again. I think he's got a prime spot here for another possible start of the week type of week. On the Bears side, Justin Fields, you're playing him as a QB1 no matter the matchup. David Montgomery, I think he's a high end wide receiver or RB2 and in this matchup as the only running back. He's going to get a lot of opportunity. And as far as the receivers, don't really want anyone except Cole Kmet as a pass catcher, low end tight end 1.
Taking the words right out of my mouth there. I am going to go the over. I'm going to go Chicago to cover. Going to go Philly to win. Justin Fields for me, QB1. Monty, he's, David Montgomery, he's an RB2. Cole Kmet, low end tight end 1. Not really looking to any pass catchers other than Cole Kmet, like you said. For Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts, he could be the quarterback 1. Just another fantastic spot for him. AJ Brown, wide receiver 1. Devontae Smith, high end wide receiver 2. Miles Sanders, like you said, in another smash spot here, a high end RB1. And then if Dallas Goedert can go, he's back in your lineup as a middle, mid-tier tight end 1 if he's activated.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to the next matchup. We've got the 5-8 Pittsburgh Steelers traveling to Carolina to take on the 5-8 Carolina Panthers. This game has a 38.5-point total, where the Carolina Panthers are 2.5-point home favorites. In terms of weather, we're okay there. In terms of injuries, Carolina's mostly okay. For Pittsburgh, Pat Freiermuth and Deontay Johnson both started on the injury report. They both have been removed from the injury report after being DNPs with a foot and a hip, respectively. Kenny Pickett is doubtful with a concussion, so he most likely will not play in this game. And then Miles Jack was a DNP with a groin. In terms of the game here, I'm going to take the under. I'm going to take Carolina to cover. I will take Carolina to win. For Carolina, Foreman and Hubbard, both RB3 flex options. For Pittsburgh, Deontay Johnson is a wide receiver 2 if he's expected to go, so he's a wide receiver 2. Not really sure I want to go with Pickens. Hasn't been as productive as late, hasn't seen the target volume, and I don't want that many. I don't want to be too invested in Mitch Trubisky. So, I will be hesitant to play Pickens this week. And then for Najee Harris, he's an RB3. It's based on volume. The matchup is not great. We recently talked about Carolina's defense and how good they've been. So Najee Harris and RB3 again based on volume.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the under. I'm gonna take Pittsburgh to cover and Pittsburgh to win. On the Pittsburgh side is really, Najee Harris, high in RB3. I think he get a RB2 day if he gets a touchdown. As far as the pass catchers, the only one I'm really trusting is Pat Freiermuth as a lock at the tight end position, tight end 1. Deontay Johnson's in the wide receiver 3 territory. Could give you a safe floor if he get targeted heavily. On the Carolina side, though, the running backs, again, it's really up and down all year. I think Deontay Foreman is kind of the guy I'm again trusting as a low-end RB2, and that's about it. DJ Moore is an RB3, wide receiver 3, and yeah, no one you want too many pieces from this game though.
Yeah, definitely want too many pieces from this game. I don't know if DJ Moore was on the injury report. I know he was earlier. He was on the injury report earlier this week. Is he expected to play? I didn't write him up because I was not sure if he was going to play. Questionable after a limited practice. He's a game time decision against the Steelers. I didn't realize, I didn't take the L for him being my start of the week because he was injured. But I did not realize, Greg, that he played 96% of the snaps before the injury.
Got a great matchup this week too. Steelers
I am sorry to everyone that played DJ Moore after I made him my start of the week, and he did that, and I didn't even take the L here, so I owe you an apology because that must have sucked. Anyway, could you confidently play him this week in the matchup, despite the good matchup?
I think with Sam Darnold, I think you can play him. I think he's more with the matchup, and if he's coming off an injury, it is tough. But I think I can see him as a flex.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely the range of outcomes are wide. He did well in a bad matchup against Denver, right? And then turns around and does poorly in a good matchup against Seattle. So willing to just say that was the randomness of football, right? Like it happens. All right, let's move on to the next game. Let's talk about the 10-3 Dallas Cowboys traveling to Jacksonville to take on the 5-8 Jacksonville Jaguars. This game has a 47.5 point total where the Dallas Cowboys are 4.5 point road favorites in this one. Weather is okay in this one in terms of injuries for Jacksonville. For Dallas, they have a few guys questionable, but nobody really concerned. For Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence, he's limited with the toe injury, so he's questionable. They got a few other guys questionable as well. In terms of the game here, though, Greg, where do you lean?
I'm gonna take the over. I'm gonna take Dallas to cover and Dallas to win. On Dallas side, I think Jacksonville being a solid rush defense, I think it will allow Dak to kind of lean on the passing game a little bit. So I think he's in a good spot here. Jaguars on the outside is very weak though, so that sets up a good matchup here for Dak to give you a QB one day. The running back story, you're still playing them. Tony Pollard and Zeke, I think, are both in that borderline RB1 territory. I think Tony Pollard, of course, has the higher upside, but Zeke is like strong RB2 at the very least. The receivers, CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 1. Michael Gallup, I think, is a wide receiver 3. Dalton Schultz is also in the smash right here on the outside. I think he's going to be the main guy Dak looks to besides CeeDee Lamb. So a lot of pieces on Dallas sides to play. On Jacksonville side, not going crazy to start Trevor Lawrence this week. I think I would take Dak in this matchup over Trevor Lawrence. He has been hot, but Dallas being a solid defense, I still think Trevor Lawrence is a borderline QB1. But there's some harder matchups you could possibly play. But the receivers on the outside, Christian Kirk, wide receiver 1, Zay Jones, strong wide receiver 2, Evan Ingram, a tight end 1. So I taking the over, so I think there should be points to be had. So Trevor Lawrence is still playable.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over here as well. I'm going to take Dallas to cover, Dallas to win. Dak Prescott, he's a QB1. Dalton Schultz, a tight end 1 option, probably a top 2 option at the position this week with a fantastic matchup. Tony Pollard, he's an RB2. So is Zeke. Obviously, how the touchdowns fall. Both of those guys could end up RB1s. I mean, they've done that, a few times so far this season. But, in terms of where I have them ranked, they'll be RB2s for me. CeeDee Lamb, matchup is good. I have him down as a wide receiver 2 just based on recent usage and then the matchup here, but wouldn't be surprised to see him finish as a wide receiver 1. And then for Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence, the QB1, Zay Jones and Christian Kirk, both going to be wide receiver 2s for me. Evan Ingram, he's a tight end 1 option. The matchup isn't great though, so don't, if you're expecting the 11 catch, 162 yard, 2 touchdown performance, you definitely should not expect that because you probably won't get it. Travis Etienne is a borderline unplayable at this point.
Crazy.
But he's an RB3 at best, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. Didn't mention him, but yeah, for sure. I think he's still an RB3. The running back department
at
is
best.
Rough. At best, though, yeah. You gotta hope this game kind of pops off a little bit for him, though.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to break a long touchdown run, or he's got to get used in the passing game a little bit more for you to really get that upside. In terms of, it's funny, right? Because we just talked about Evan Ingram. If you were expecting that, like, don't expect that again. And then it just made me think back to Kadarius Toney after he had the 10 catch, 189 yard game against the Cowboys. And I said the next week, I was like, yeah, we're never going to get that game again. And we haven't gotten it since. So, yeah. Anyway, let's move on to this next game here. We've got the 4-9 Arizona Cardinals traveling to Denver to take on the 3-10 Denver Broncos. This game has a 36.5-point total, where the Denver Broncos are 2.5-point home favorites. In terms of weather, no weather concerns in this game. In terms of injuries for Arizona, Zach Allen, is out with a hand injury after having surgery. Defensive lineman. Kyler Murray, obviously, we talked about him tearing his ACL. He's placed on injured reserve. For Denver, Cortland Sutton and Kendall Hinton, both out of this game, both dealing with injuries. Russell Wilson, who was returned on Thursday to a limited practice, apparently was cleared from the concussion protocol, but is listed as out and will not play. So Brett Ripien will get the start here for the Arizona Cardinals, or for the Denver Broncos. In terms of the game here, I'm going to take the under. I will take the Cardinals to cover. I will take the Cardinals to win. For Arizona, James Conner, DeAndre Hopkins, both ones at their respective positions. Marquise Brown, he's a wide receiver 3 or 4. Did pop up on the injury report today with an illness. So maybe that downgrades him a little bit, depending on how he's feeling. But for Denver, I think Latavius Murray, I have him ranked as an RB1. I don't think he finished as an RB1 last week, and that's kind of where I had him ranked last week as well. So definitely proceed with caution there. But the volume has been good enough that I think he's an RB2, especially no Russell Wilson. It's definitely an RB2 with some RB1 upside there. Again, the matchup is great. The Arizona Cardinals allow the 6th most PPR points to the running back position over their last 3 games. So you could lean into that if you're desperate at the running back position. Jerry Jeudy, a wide receiver 2 for me this week. Greg Dulcich, he's a tight end 1. Again, it's the matchup and, potential the injuries here.
Yeah, I'm also going to take the under. I'm going to take the Cardinals to cover and the Cardinals to win as well. I think the better running game kind of wins here. Arizona's got it, and Denver's not, very, very good on, it's very solid as a rush defense. On the Cardinals side, though, James Conner and DeAndre Hopkins agree with you. They're ones at their position. Hollywood Brown is a wide receiver 3 for me. And then on the Denver side, Latavius Murray, I think, is a RB2 in this spot, low on RB2. And Greg Dulcich is just probably the tight end option, the main pass catching option I'm going to look into as a tight end 1. Jerry Jeudy should get some opportunities, though. It's a tough matchup, but I think I like him as a wide receiver 2.
Yep, I agree. Let's move on to the next matchup here. Let's go on with the 7-6 New England Patriots traveling to Las Vegas to take on the 5-8 Las Vegas Raiders. This game has a 44.5-point total. And the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick are 1.5-point favorites over his protege, Josh McDaniels. In terms of weather, we're okay. This game's in a dome. In terms of injuries, Josh Jacobs, he was limited with a quad and a hand. Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow were both designated to return from the injured reserve. Jacoby Myers, DNP with a concussion. Don't expect him to play. Damian Harris, limited with a thigh. Not sure what to expect there. Devontae Parker, he was a DNP with a concussion. Don't expect him to play either. And then Ramondre Stevenson, he, after being a DNP with an ankle, he returned to limited practice on Friday. And then Christian Barmore, he's designated to return from injured reserve. Greg, where do you lean with this game?
This game, I'm going to take the over. I'm going to take the Pats to cover, the Pats to win. As far as, the Patriots side, I can make an argument here for, Mac Jones to be in Superflex conversation. I think this is one of those weeks that Mac Jones can pop off a little bit, so he can give you a high-end QB2 day. Ramondre Stevenson, you're hoping he's going. If he goes, he's an RB1 for sure in this good matchup, especially if Damian Harris is going to be out. If he can't go, though, look to some other options for the Patriots running back situation here. As far as the receivers, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, I think they can be used in deeper leagues as a wide receiver 3. And both of them have upside, I think, in this matchup. If you're in a deep league and you're desperate to find a wide receiver, I think you could look to possibly both of these guys to give you a solid floor. On the Raiders side, It's really Josh Jacobs as an RB1 for me, despite the matchup, and Devontae Adams being a wide receiver one as well. And if Darren Waller is able to go, then he's a low end tight end one.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over here. I'm going to take the Vegas Raiders to cover. I'm going to take the Vegas Raiders to win. Josh Jacobs, definitely an RB1. Devontae Adams, a wide receiver one for sure. Not, you said you brought up Darren Waller. That's interesting. I feel like because of the tight end landscape, you'd almost have to, unless you have a better option, which you could, because what if you have like a David Njoku
Yeah,
or, what
David
if,
Njoku, Dalton Schultz.
I think I would play Greg Dulcich over Darren Waller.
Yeah,
It's tough because he wasn't really super productive before the injury. But again, we don't know how long he was dealing with that. So yeah, I don't know. That's definitely interesting. But for I definitely say Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams, or ones at their respective positions. For New England, if I don't expect Ramondre to go. I mean, they did this last time with Mac Jones when he had the high ankle sprain, like didn't practice all week and then showed up to a limited practice, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, I practiced," but then he didn't play. And then even with a running back with a high ankle sprain, there's no like just I find it really hard to believe that Ramondre Stevenson would come in one game after suffering a high ankle sprain with less days rest because this happened on Monday Night Football, and then you had to travel from the West Coast to the East Coast. Actually, no, they stayed on the West Coast, so I guess he didn't travel. But either way, having to play 6 days after suffering a high ankle sprain, like I find that very hard that he would do that and do it effectively. So Damian Harris, there's injury experts don't anticipate that he would play, but he's been limited. So if he can't go, I heard you saying the Patriots running backs. I believe Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris were the names. I'm more of the Pierre Strong camp, mainly because of his receiving ability, and he looked like when he got in the open field, like he was moving. So has some real speed there. So if Harris can't go, I really like Pierre Strong this week. I think you'd expect a tandem of Strong and Harris, of Kevin Harris, and then if Damian Harris can go, I still like Strong to have upside because he seems like the best fit for the pass catching role between the two Harrises, Damian and Kevin and himself. So either way, I think he has a role as the pass catching running back, especially without Stevenson. Hunter Henry also, he has some intrigue as a tight end option. And then,
yeah.
like you mentioned with Nelson Aguilar, I think no Jacoby Myers. Nelson Aguilar is going to have to play here and get the ball down the field. They're going to have to get the ball down the field some way, somehow. And it's somewhat of a revenge game for Nelson Aguilar because he did play for the Raiders.
There you go. Yeah, no, Hunter Henry for sure is also in a great matchup as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's your stream of the week, right? So,
Yes, sir.
all right, let's move on to this next matchup here. 4:05 or 4:25 as these last two games we covered were at 4:05 actually, but this next game here 4:25 p.m. the 7-6 Tennessee Titans traveling to Los Angeles to take on the 7-6 LA Chargers. This game has a 46.5 point total, where the LA Chargers are 3-point favorites. In terms of the weather, we're okay. In terms of injuries, Derwin James listed as doubtful with a quad, not expected to play. For Tennessee, Treylon Burks is listed as out with a concussion, will not play in this game. I am going to take the over. I am going to take the Titans to cover, and I'm going to take the Titans to win. This game is going to be crazy. It's the Chargers. They play in this game.
Yep.
So expect whatever you think could happen because it probably will in this game. And then for the Chargers, Justin Herbert, high end QB1. I think I love all the Chargers pieces in this game. Herbert's a high end QB1. Mike Williams is a high end wide receiver one along with Keenan Allen. Austin Eckler, he's an RB1. Gerald Everett, he has a fantastic matchup.
Again, that man has had the best matchup of a tight end this season, yo. This matchup has been all amazing, yo. Again.
Which says a lot, right? Because if his matchups are so good and he's still just like barely a tight end one.
Yeah, average. He's
Like,
been average at best.
what does
Yeah.
that say about Gerald Everett?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Anyway, Josh Palmer is a wide receiver 3 or 4. Again, the matchup here is great. Tennessee struggles against wide receivers and just passing games in general. So if you need an option, you need a flex that can have a high ceiling. I think Josh Palmer could be your guy. And then for Tennessee, Tannehill, he's my stream of the week at the quarterback position. I think he's a QB1 option. And what's a rough week for quarterbacks? Derrick Henry, an RB1. The matchup was great on paper. The Chargers did shut down the pass game, the run game of the Miami Dolphins last week, but Derrick Henry I feel like he's due, man. So definitely an RB1 day loading. And then Chigozum Okonkwo and Austin Hooper, I think, can both be tight end 1 options in this game.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the over. I'm gonna take the Chargers to cover, Chargers to win. Definitely a field goal game here for sure, though. On the Tennessee side, on the Chargers side, I agree with you pretty much for all those players. Herbert being a prime matchup QB1, Eckler RB1, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams both. Keenan Allen being a wide receiver 1, Mike Williams being a strong wide receiver 2. And as far as Jared Everett, he's a playable borderline tight end 1. The matchup is great, and he's still going to get his number of targets. It's a matter of what he's going to do with them. On the and Josh Palmer as well. I think he's in that flex category, deep league flex category with those other receivers being back. On the Chargers side, on the Tennessee side, Tannehill, he's a high in QB2 for me. Derrick Henry, also Eckler, the top 2 running backs on the matchup for this spot, so they should both dominate. Traylon Burks, I think he's a wide receiver 3, and no, Traylon Burks for sure. Yeah, he's over. And Chigo, yeah, I think is a streamable tight end. I think coming off the best week of the year last week, solid matchup, so he should continue to be used along with Austin Hooper.
Yeah, the matchup's not tough there, but they script plays for him for Chigo and with Treylon Burks out, I think there's got to be some usage here, some utilization for the tight ends. But I do expect Robert Woods and or Nick Westbrook-Akine to have some upside. I just don't know which one it's going to be, so I can't recommend it. All right, let's move on to this next matchup here. 9-4 Cincinnati Bengals traveling to Tampa Bay. We'll take on the 6-7 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This game has a 43.5 point total, where the Cincinnati Bengals are 3.5 point road favorites in this one. In terms of weather, we're okay there. In terms of injuries for Cincinnati, Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins were both limited. However, T. Higgins returned to a full practice on Friday. So that is definitely good news. Hayden Hurst is out with the calf. Defensive end edge rusher Trey Hendrickson, he's out with the wrist. For Tampa Bay, Julio Jones DNP with the knee. Antoine Winfield Jr., the safety, questionable with an ankle. Greg, where do you lean on this matchup?
I'm gonna take the over. I'm gonna take Cincy to cover and Cincy to win. On the Cincy side, Joe Burrow, QB1 matchup. As far as the running backs, Joe Mixon and RB1. Samaje Perine, I think, is a RB3, RB4 territory. As far as the receivers, it looks like no Hayden Hurst, and Tyler Boyd's banged up, so you got to go to the reliable top 2. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, I think, are both have some. If T. Higgins is back and healthy, I think they both have some wide receiver 1 upside. Obviously, Jamar Chase is in a high upside wide receiver 1. T. Higgins more like a safe floor wide receiver 2, but I think he has wide receiver 1 upside. And on the Tampa side, Brady, I think he's gonna have to put up some points here. So to stay with Cincinnati's offense, so I think he's high in QB2. Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White, if they're both able to go, Fournette's able to go. I think they're both in that RB3 territory. And as far as the receivers, it's tough to trust Mike Evans right now. Chris Godwin's the one I really want as a wide receiver. Mike Evans, low end wide receiver 2 territory for me.
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to take the under. I'm going to take the Cincinnati Bengals to cover. I will also take the Cincinnati Bengals to win this game. In terms of the fantasy analysis, I am going to take Jamar Chase, I feel like he's the wide receiver 1 on the week here potentially. The matchup is it's good, but he's been absolutely fantastic. So definitely love that there. In terms of for T Higgins, I have a little bit not concern. I think obviously we know what the production is. He's a wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside. I guess my only concern there is that he is prone potentially to re-injury here. Practice in full, so that's not maybe less of a concern than it was, but just hamstrings can be tricky. But that's more of like a DFS thing than it is a redraft thing. You're gonna play T Higgins in redraft leagues. In terms of Joe Burrow, QB1 for sure. Joe Mixon and RB1 for Tampa Bay. Chris Godwin, a wide receiver 2. Fournette and Rachaad White, they're both RB2s, but that workload split was almost dead even last week in terms of the points in the fantasy output. But it seemed like Rachaad White was a little bit more involved as a runner, where Fournette was involved as a receiver. I still would lean Rachaad White, though. Just again, he has a higher upside. Mike Evans is like impossible to trust based on recent production, but I think you can get away with playing him just because he's experienced some really bad luck. I think, just if it's not Brady, behind him a little bit or overthrowing him a little bit here or throwing it short, or, maybe Mike Evans is running the wrong route and we don't know that. Or if it's, just last week where he catches a 70-something yard touchdown and it gets called back for holding. So I feel like you can play Mike Evans. You just don't feel confident when you insert him into your lineup. And then for Tom Brady, I have not had Brady ranked inside my top 20 since like the first few weeks of the season. And rightfully so. I mean, he's only got 3 QB1 performances on the year, and 2 of those came back-to-back weeks between, playing against Kansas City and Atlanta. And most recently was the New Orleans game in week 13, which, a lot of that came on that last drive there to win that game. So I don't know if you could confidently play Tom Brady.
Yeah, I mean, playoff Tom Brady historically hasn't been really good, but I think the Kansas City formula here, Bengals are going to be putting up points, so I think can give you QB 13 day, QB 14 range.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that would be fortunate if that happened, right? Like you'd feel fortunate QB 13, QB 14. So it's tough. It really sucks if you were banking on somebody like Mike White in this great matchup, but it's not a great quarterback week. So like you said, if you think this game goes over, Tom Brady has to keep pace with Joe Burrow, then most definitely makes sense from that standpoint. Let's move on to this next game, which makes Greg all excited because he gets to see his Giants in prime time here, playing against the 7-5-1 New York Giants, playing against the 7-5-1 Washington Commanders. This game has a 40.5 point total. The Washington Commanders are 4.5 point home favorites. The last time these two teams faced off was actually not that long ago. It was 2 weeks ago. And the Commanders have had a bye week since that game. So they played the Giants, went on bye, played the Giants again. I don't think that's happened since like the 1960s, I think was what I had seen earlier. That a team played a team and then went on bye and then played that same team again. So the in terms of weather, we're okay. In terms of injuries for the New York Giants, Xavier McKinney, who suffered the hand injury, I guess was on track to potentially return for this game. He's out. Daniel Bellinger, he's limited with ribs. Ellerson Smith, he's on IR with an Achilles injury. Richie James Jr., wide receiver, was limited with a concussion. And then for Washington, Montez Sweat was a full participant in practice, dealing with a concussion. Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson were both limited with a quad and a foot, respectively. And then Chase Young, limited with a knee injury. In terms of the game here, I will take the under. That's my pick. No, I'm changing this. There's no way. I'm taking the under. I'm taking Washington to cover. No, the Giants to cover, Washington to win. That's probably what I wanted. No. I'm just going to take Washington to cover and win. Let's just do that. These teams are trending in opposite directions. Last time these two teams faced, again, like I said, it was a tie. So I will take Washington to cover and win. For the New York Giants, Daniel Jones, do I even have to say it? Can we just like pre-record a Daniel Jones blurb that we would play every time that just simply says he could fall into a QB1 week because of his legs? Can we just make a drop and we'll just play that every time we talk about the Giants game? But Darius Slayton, wide receiver 3. Saquon Barkley, again, has been underwhelming. RB2 or 3, again, those are the range of outcomes. But it's playoffs. I feel like you almost have to play him unless you have some significantly better options. And for Washington, Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 1, Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, both in great spots here. I lean Brian Robinson based on recent usage. And then Taylor Heineke, he's an interesting QB2. The matchup is great for him. And then Logan Thomas has tight end 1 upside in this matchup as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the under. I'm gonna take Washington to cover, Washington to win as well. On the Giants side, Daniel Jones, we already know what to make of him. Saquon Barkley, if he's playing, yeah, I think he's got to play him. Treat him as a low end RB1, solid RB2 at least. So you're playing him. You got here with him. The receivers, if Darius Slayton is able to go, he's like the only pass catcher I would want. And Dave Bellinger is a low end, tight end 2 territory. On the Washington side, it's mostly Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson being those guys in the running game as RB3s. I think Brian Robinson, this could be a matchup for him to get that edge because they're going to be up. So he's an RB2 for me. I think he can possibly get that upside. Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 1. And that's about it. Should be a good day for that Commanders defense for sure.
Most definitely. Let's move on to this next matchup, the last matchup of the day. Monday Night Football, 8:15 p.m. The 4-9 Los Angeles Rams travel to Green Bay, Wisconsin, to take on the 5-8 Green Bay Packers. This game has a 39.5 point total, where the Green Bay Packers are 7-point home favorites. You get, Greg, a frozen tundra game in Lambeau this week. It is expected to be freezing temperatures, so it will be cold. We'll see all of the people breathing and all the air coming out of their mouth. So it will be one of those games there. Aaron Jones limited with an ankle. David Bakhtiari, the tackle, he's doubtful after having his appendix removed. And then for the LA Rams, John Wolford, he is out dealing with a neck injury. Aaron Donald was a DNP with an ankle there. And then in terms of the game here, as Greg suffers through a little bit of some technical difficulties there, it looks like. For the Green Bay, I'm going to take the under here. I'm going to take the Los Angeles Rams to cover. I will take the Green Bay Packers to ultimately win the game. And then for in terms of the fantasy, I will take Christian Watson as a wide receiver 1, Aaron Jones, have him down as an RB1 this week. Aaron Rodgers will be a QB2. AJ Dillon, have him down in running back 3 territory. Allen Lazard, a low-end wide receiver 3. And then for the LA Rams, it's really tough. Baker Mayfield, obviously, his first game back, or his first game in general with the Rams, looked good. But I can't see myself playing anybody from this game. Maybe in DFS or something, but in the fantasy playoffs, definitely can't do it. Maybe, just maybe, the running backs, but that would be it. Sorry, just communicating with Greg here. Says his internet crashed, so that's unfortunate there. Trying to see if we can get him to rejoin us. Again, waiting to see if we can get Greg in here. So, like I said, his internet crashed. So we'll see if we can get him back. But again, if you have any questions at all, then drop them in the chat. If not, like I said, I will be on Did It potentially Saturday and potentially Sunday morning answering some start set questions if you want some one-on-one if you want a one-on-one video chat. But sorry about the technical difficulties, y'all. Again, we'll see if we can get Greg in here. All right, it looks like we might not be able to get Greg in here, so let's just proceed. Carry on with the rest of the show. So again, sorry for the technical difficulties for those that are watching live. For those that are listening in podcast platform, we've been able to speed up time. How about that? Let's get into the starts of the week, and I won't completely spoil Greg's starts of the week just in case we do get him back in here. But I will talk about my starts of the week. And for my quarterback start of the week, this may seem like an obvious answer. Somewhat is, but I'm going with it for two reasons. Because the matchup is perceived to not be a great one, because of how well this defense has been playing, and then I will. On top of that, it hasn't been a great week for quarterbacks, and on top of that, who I selected for my quarterback start of the week, Greg also selected. And we might double up for a stream of the week, but for starts of the week, we almost never double up. So my quarterback start of the week this week is going to be Mr. Justin Fields going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. And again, like I said, I know the Philadelphia defense seems like a tough matchup, but over the last 3 weeks, over the last 3 games, they've allowed the 9th most fantasy points to the quarterback position. So, Fields has been dominant with his legs. I expect that to continue. If you've been able to ride him to this point into the fantasy playoffs. Let him take you here to a championship. That starts this week. Top 5 week here for Justin Fields. Book it. My running back start of the week this week is going to be Brian Robinson Jr. going up against the New York Giants. I am going back to the well. That is the New York Giants. Brian Robinson had his best game of his career and of the season 2 weeks ago when he played against these same Giants. Miles Sanders put up a $144 and 2 playing against these same Giants last week. So again, going with Brian Robinson, attacking this New York Giants rush defense that over the last three weeks, over the last 3 games, they have allowed the 5th most PPR points to the running back position. Robinson has seen an uptick in volume and is coming again off of his best game, was even involved as a pass catcher and could be more utilized in that part of the game, seeing as he's a rookie coming off of a bye week. So you like we like to say, rookies after the bye, especially if they come this late in the season, it's even more of a reason to go in to hammer that one home. And then with my wide receiver start of the week, that's the one where you got to take some Pepto-Bismol before you put this one in your lineup. But my wide receiver start of the week is Chris Moore. Talked about him before, but going real deep here. This is a deep league play. You know, you're not going to play him over, your Justin Jeffersons or, the guys in that caliber of players, right? Like Tyreek Hill, who's, again, playing the snow game, Stephon Diggs playing the snow game, play those guys. But if you need high upside, you just went against George Kittle, who dropped, almost 30 on you. You need to counteract that some way, somehow. Got to go high risk, high reward here. Chris Moore, I think, is your guy. Last week, he saw 12 targets, caught 10 of them for 124 receiving yards, and potentially another week here. Again, no Cooks, no Nico Collins. Could mean more wide receiver 1 usage here for Chris Moore. The game script should be negative, and he should continue to see targets funneled his way without many options available to whoever's playing at quarterback, especially without a Dameon Pierce, as well to lean on in the run game. I think this could get a little ugly here, for in terms of the options that are going to be available to whoever's playing quarterback. So Chris Moore, wide receiver 1 usage from his team. I think that ultimately lands him as at least a wide receiver 2 for fantasy. So tight end start of the week here. This one I feel like is pretty obvious. I'm going with Greg Dulcich up against the Arizona Cardinals. This one is really simple. No Cortland Sutton, no Kendall Hinton, and he gets to play Arizona. So yeah, going all in on Greg Dulcich for a top 5 week. Now, those are my starts of the week. Let's get into Greg's starts of the week here. And let's start with his quarterback start of the week. Like I mentioned, he did not steal my quarterback start of the week. He rightfully chose a very good start of the week here in Dak Prescott, and gets to go up against Jacksonville, who over their last 3 games allowed the 7th most fantasy points to the quarterback position. Dak hasn't been great, but I feel like this is the perfect spot for him in a game that has a decently high total, I believe 43.5. And Jacksonville should make it competitive. So I do like Dak Prescott here to have himself a top 10 day for fantasy managers. And then Greg's running back start of the week, going back to the Houston well. I went to the Giants well for back-to-back weeks after going to Miles Sanders last week. And Greg is going back to the Houston well after going to the Tony Pollard his start of the week last week. This time he goes with Isaiah Pacheco of Kansas City. And again, Houston, not great against the running back position. 10th most PPR points to the running backs over their last 3 games. So this is a fantastic matchup for Pacheco, who's done well, given his opportunities. And again, should have the opportunities here in a game in which the Chiefs are 14-point favorites. Again, the matchup is really good. So I really do like Pacheco to have himself a day being in a smash spot here. It could be an RB1 helping people advance in the fantasy playoffs. And then there is Christian Watson of the LA Rams, or sorry, not of the LA Rams, of the Green Bay Packers, going up against the LA Rams. And this matchup, not super great, 17th most PPR points to the wide receiver position, but this is all about staying with your guys here, staying with the guys that got you this far. Christian Watson, he's been really good. And while the matchup isn't fantastic, the Rams allow the 17th most, there's still an advantageous matchup, allowing more fantasy points to wide receivers than the average matchup here. So Christian Watson, who's been really good over his last 4 games, again, in a matchup that should be a positive one here. I have him inside my top 12 of wide receivers as the wide receiver 11. So that puts him as a wide receiver 1. So you definitely got to start Christian Watson this week. So I totally agree with him being Greg's start of the week. And I mentioned earlier that Greg, quote unquote, stole a start of the week from me at the quarterback position. Well, guess what? He did the same thing at tight end, and me and him were having the same idea here with our starts of the week, stacking the quarterback with the tight end here. And he went with Dak Prescott as his quarterback start of the week. He's going with Dalton Schultz, which is exactly what I was trying to do here. So if you have Dak Prescott, you have Dalton Schultz. Shoot, if you have them both, start them up. But Dalton Schultz, again, gets a fantastic matchup. Jacksonville, over their last 3 games, allows the second most PPR points to the tight end position. So Dalton Schultz in a fantastic spot. I think he's a top 2 option at the position, behind only Travis Kelce this week. So you're definitely going to start him up. Now, unfortunately, we don't get Greg back in here. So that means we can't play Get Money. We're going to have to figure some way there to break that tiebreaker. We'll see. We'll figure it out. But everyone, we definitely appreciate y'all for vibing with us. We appreciate y'all kicking it with us here on this lovely Friday evening. We usually don't record on Friday. Here we are. We haven't done a Friday show in a minute. But anyway, we'll see y'all on Monday when we break down the week that was, week 15. Hopefully more of you, all of you that are listening to this, are getting into the fantasy playoffs. So we're going to, be back here Monday, trying to help you advance from round 2 to round 3, get to that fantasy championship. And there's, keep going 1-0 each week, y'all. So good luck this week. Enjoy all the football. Just remember, Saturday, there's games. Those players can't be in your flex unless you've already played some Thursday night players, and then you got to put them in your flex. But essentially, you got to make sure that these guys are in a running back or wide receiver or a quarterback position if you play super flex, so that you can have some flexibility, especially in the fantasy playoffs. You don't want that to be a reason you get eliminated. Keep doing the stuff that got you here. Keep playing the players that got you to this point. Keep listening to us or following whatever, content creators, listening to whatever content, consuming whatever content, reading articles, whatever it is that you're doing, keep doing it. We'll see y'all on Monday. Good luck. Have a good one. And we're out of here. Peace.